everyone, it's Sam aka Ocean Unknown, and welcome back to my channel. I guess this is my official declaration that I am a booktuber now. Until this year, I had not read a book for fun in maybe 6 years. During my breaks from my regular job, I have been reading a lot, and the first book I read that re-sparked my love of reading was Bunny by Mona Awad. I got this book over a year ago and finally decided to read it, and oh my god, this book is so good. If you like horror, suspense, making fun of pretentious establishments and people, and especially supporting women's wrongs, then you will absolutely love this book. Now, I made a video last year about writing and styling my own Monster High live action movie, and I haven't done anything like that since, and I've missed it quite a bit. So with my love of Bunny and my knowledge as a costume designing student in college, I have made a full costume design for Bunny if it were to become a movie or live stage show, but more if it was a stage play because I think this would be an incredible play both from the acting perspective and the tech side of things. Like, please, anybody, please turn this into a play. Of course with Mona Awad's permission too. Lastly, this video has massive spoilers for this book, so proceed with caution. Anyways, let's get into the video.
Oh, you thought this was a rabbit? They thought this was a rabbit?
Bunny follows Samantha Heather Mackey, a scholarship creative writing student at the prestigious Warren University in New England, about to start her final year of college. Samantha feels outcast by the rest of her cohort, 4 girls who call themselves Bunny, talk in little girl voices, and act as one entity. After being invited to one of the Bunny's literary parties, which they call the Smut Salon, Samantha becomes enthralled in a world of magic, horror, and confusion. One of the things Bunny does so successfully is depict the loss of sense of self the readers see in Samantha as the story progresses, which may frustrate many as Samantha is often interpreted as an incredibly passive protagonist. But to me, the reality-altering events that occur in this book benefit from the lack of agency from Samantha, as her characterization takes a backseat so the readers can witness the absurdity of the Bunny's antics. The major themes present in the book are the complex dynamics of friendships between women, loneliness and belonging, privilege and the toxicity of elite education systems, judgment towards others and oneself, and manipulation and agency, and I took all of this into consideration when creating my designs.
Bunny, 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 you're so funny with your twitching nose.
In my process, I like to start with 2 things. The basic questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how to act as a formation for my research, and a concept statement to get a full idea of what I'm trying to accomplish with these designs. For Bunny, the who are people who inhabit a prestigious New England college who are in the MFA English program, both students and faculty. The where is New England, so the weather of New England has to be taken into consideration, especially since this story takes place over the course of a whole school year. The what are the characters' actions, so that would be what they're doing in certain scenes like going to their English workshops, going out to brunch, or doing a cultish ritual. The why and how are more about why they are dressed the way they are, which focuses more on how the characters are described in the book, and other elements like how much money the character has, what their aesthetic is, were they not originally human and conjured up from a rabbit, or are they acting on their own pretenses in this scene? And lastly is the when. Typically in a play, you take notes of references in the text to figure out when a play can be set in if the play is not in the public domain. Bunny was released in 2019, but the pop culture references present in the book specifically set it in at least after 2013, when Samantha literally in a scene sings Let It Go from Frozen in an act of desperation, which Frozen came out in November 2013. For my costume design, I set Bunny during the 2014 to 2015 college year, being from September 2014 to May 2015 due to the pop culture references present in the story and to explore the popular trends of the mid-2010s. Moving on to my concept statement, I wrote out a paragraph to guide my research and choices along with the text itself. My concept statement is, Bunny by Mona Awad is a disorienting yet vivid tale, exploring concepts of feminine friendships, horror, cult-like mentalities, empathy, and the prestigious nature of artistic institutions of the contemporary era. Awad carefully customized her characters around these themes to illustrate the satirical commentary featured in Bunny. The many pop culture references in Bunny, including Taylor Swift's Blank Space and Frozen, allude that Bunny takes place in the mid-2000s, but for this interpretation of the story, it will take place over the course of the 2014 to 2015 college school year. From September 2014 2013 to May 2015. In terms of the story, the bunnies are so detached from reality, but so is Samantha. Their costumes will reflect specific aesthetics that were popular in the mid-2010s to a T, where it's hard to believe these people exist in real life. The characters, specifically Samantha and the bunnies, go through a metamorphosis as they question their identities and bodies and how it affects their artistic work. When Samantha becomes more like the bunnies, she loses herself more and more until she is a hodgepodge of all 4 members of the cult. But as Samantha discovers more about herself in Act 2, she gains her identity back and looks how she used to appear. As for the bunnies, when they try to quote-unquote live like Samantha, their costumes introduce more black but stay true to their silhouettes and look superficial, like they're imitating Samantha's trauma and intrusive thoughts. They want her artistic mind and to tell her tales, but not to live through her traumatic experience to have those tales. In the climactic end of the bunnies and Samantha's connection, everyone is wearing black. At the final scene of graduation, Samantha and the bunnies can no longer go back to the people they once were, for better or for worse. The core of the story is between Samantha and the bunnies, and the transformation Samantha goes through because the bunnies attempt to manipulate Samantha into becoming like them and use her for their own personal use. Samantha is, however, connected to the bunnies in ways that are quite mystical. Her and the bunnies are able to conjure humans out of animals with magic. However, where the bunnies have to perform a ritual with bunny masks and La Vie and Rose playing in the background and can only use bunnies to conjure up their hybrids, Samantha is able to just think of an animal she's seen and boom, a human. The bunnies learn this by seeing Samantha's first and only creation at this point, Samantha's best friend Ava, who was conjured from a swan, who is so much more human-like than any of the bunnies' creations of misshapen men who have to wear leather gloves and often can only make horrific sounds. The bunnies recruit Samantha to join their cult since Samantha is so much better than them at this magic they all have inside them, but the bunnies' interest in Samantha goes much further than that. This part of the story is a large part of the story's satire towards prestigious and tone-deaf MFA students and teaches a lesson about appropriation and gentrification. Samantha is a scholarship student and writes what she thinks, with her pieces coming from her gritty, dark past of being a circus freak, having a strained relationship with her family and peers, a conflicted relationship with a much older male teacher who she exclusively calls the Lion, and having a horrific imagination. While Samantha is quite the judgmental character and is often tone-deaf and arrogant herself, the bunnies are truly the arrogant and tone-deaf characters. The bunnies want to write with Samantha's passion and heart, but without experiencing the trauma she has faced in her life. The bunnies have grown up with money, security, healthy friends and family, and safety their entire lives, and to them, this is why their art doesn't have that oomph. That is also why they aren't able to create better and more realistic hybrids, and are only able to create half-baked clones of a young Marlon Brando with no hands or reproductive organs. When they see Ava, a perfect hybrid who Samantha basically customized like a video game character to be her perfect best friend without Samantha even knowing she did this. The bunnies take this newfound information to their advantage and feed off Samantha's disgust but also fascination with them and slowly indoctrinate her into bending to their will. After Samantha is snapped out of her brainwashing by Ava, Samantha still isn't the same person she was before, and even more so as the bunnies ask Samantha to lead their ritual, which leads to the creation of the story's very own Frankenstein's monster mixed with Jason Dean, Max. Max is just as much of a perfect hybrid as Ava is, but Max has some devious intentions. Where Ava represents Samantha's love and loneliness and fills the hole in her heart devoid of a sense of belonging, Max represents Samantha's anger and desire to get revenge on those who have what she could never have. Max is the antithesis of the bunnies and their hybrids and takes full action to get revenge on them that Samantha at this point could only dream of. All of this culminates with the bunnies killing Ava, causing Samantha to realize the magic she's had all this time and how the bunnies stole everything from her, as Max and Samantha plot their final act of revenge, to kill the bunnies. Samantha, however, cannot bring herself to hurt them, and the bunnies end up causing their own destruction as they claw and fight each other over Max, who has been intruding on their lives to fit their disturbing fantasies for their stories. In the end, Max is revealed to have been conjured up from a stag by Samantha, and Samantha is left alone once again as Max reverts back to a deer, and the bunnies leave to deal with their own self-implosions. The ending of Bunny is up to the reader's interpretation, as it's unclear if the one remaining person Samantha has left, a poetry student named Jonah, who also writes darker pieces like Samantha, was also a figment of Samantha's imagination. My interpretation for the staged version of Bunny will play with both interpretations, with hypothetically in the final scene, the lights would turn off where Jonah is, where he says the final line, "Yes, I'd love to," leaving the answer in the audience's hand if Jonah or the dirt beneath Samantha said it. Samantha starts and leaves Bunny alone, but she isn't the same person she was before the bunnies grew interested in her. The bunnies are also not the same, as they are experiencing what should have been the most exciting day of their lives in knee braces, casts, and crutches. The transformation that Samantha and the bunnies go through was really what impacted the story the costumes in my designs were telling, and showed that none of them can go back to the way things were, and their actions have impacted them to a significant degree. Now, I'm going to move on to the characters' inspirations and move over to my mood boards to explain my inspirations for each character and how they fit with the story.
Dear Diary, my teen angst bullshit has a body count.
Starting with our protagonist, Samantha Mackey, we hear about her physical appearance the least out of the characters because she is the narrator of the story. What the book tells us is that Samantha is very tall, about 5'11" or taller, and that she is more on the comfortable but edgy side when it comes to fashion. She is described to be wearing ripped jeans, fishnet tights, and a flannel in almost every moment of the book, and she alludes to her hair as a bitch curtain. Taking into consideration her personality, how she is described in the book, and the fall 2014 to spring 2015 time frame I gave myself, my main inspirations for Samantha's costume design were Tumblr girls of the mid-2010s, along with characters from TV shows and movies that were very popular among Tumblr users of the time, most notably Effie from the show Skins and Bender and Allison from The Breakfast Club. Also, oftentimes my inspirations for my costume designs for characters are not clothes or costumes worn by other characters, but more like overall vibes, like what I think the character's music taste is, what their favorite movies and TV shows are, what celebrities I think they obsess over, etc. For Samantha, I wrote down a grungy emo Tumblr girl, almost always wearing black and a flannel. She thinks watching Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind once makes her the smartest person in the world. She thinks she's the only one who understands that Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is satire. Says she listens to something you wouldn't know, but it's actually Arctic Monkeys or the Smiths. There's an arrogance and superficiality to her individuality complex, which I wanted to reflect in her costume design as well. With my reference photos, I took to Tumblr to find inspiration for Samantha's outfits for Act 1 or Part 1 of the book, which is from the beginning to the end of the first ritual. Since I pictured this as a staged play, Samantha is on stage in almost every scene, and thus taking practicality into consideration would have the least amount of costume changes throughout the play. However, out of all of the characters, Samantha goes through the biggest transformation in not only personality and growth, but also through how she looks and dresses herself. And this is the most evident in the transition from Samantha in Act 1 and Samantha in Act 2 being Part 2 and 3 of the book. As Samantha becomes indoctrinated into the bunny cult, she begins to dress more like the bunnies in terms of style, shapes, and color palettes. Samantha's bunny look is also reminiscent of Alice from Alice in Wonderland because of the fact that bunnies are a massive motif in both Alice in Wonderland and Bunny, and also the nod to Alice makes sense with Samantha's journey to this newfound life with the bunnies that is as feverish and outlandish as the rabbit hole fall to Wonderland. After Samantha's infatuation with the bunnies is fractured, her curiosity is now fixated on her own creation, Max, as well as gaining her own autonomy after being under the bunny's control. When school is let out for winter break, Samantha is back in her more neutral and dark color palette. However, her regained control is coupled with softer shapes of cardigan sweaters, lace trims, and fabrics and designs more synonymous with the bunnies. Samantha stays in this costume until the final scene, her graduation, where her major dramatic question is answered. After everything she has been through in the events of the book, Samantha can no longer go back to the person she was at the start. She has gained back control of her own narrative, but lost nearly every relationship she had in the process. But probably the most important question of Samantha's journey is, did she really gain back control of her own story? As I mentioned earlier, the book leaves the answer to this question open-ended, and I thought the best way to convey this confusion over whether Samantha gets a happy ending or not is to put her in a gray dress that combines her style from the beginning and the ruffles and more feminine designs of the bunnies. Like how Samantha's end to her story is stuck in this gray area and is unclear clear, final costume is a representation of her journey and how there isn't really a concrete resolution for what she just experienced. Moving on to Samantha's best friend Ava, she is described as the antithesis of the bunnies. Rough around the edges, classy but in a messy, romanticized kind of way, and alternative. As it is revealed when she is killed by the bunnies, Ava was also a hybrid made by Samantha way before the events of the story out of a swan Samantha used to watch at a nearby pond at the college campus. While alternative styles go through trends and phases throughout the years, Ava's costuming was inspired by universal aesthetics and styles rather than staying true to the time frame of 2014 to 2015. My main inspirations for Ava's designs were the romantic goth aesthetic combined with elements of the indie sleaze aesthetic popularized by shows like Skins in the mid-2010s and the impractical funeral attire of the characters of Pretty Little Liars, as well as making sure to convey the swan-like elements of Ava's character since she, is actually a swan. In my inspiration boards, I included a lot of pictures from the film Black Swan since the beauty and horror of the film fits Ava's character very well. I had to include the crucial elements to her costuming mentioned in the book like her black mesh gloves and black birdcage veil, which function as foreshadowing to Ava being a draft and Samantha being a lot better at magic than the bunnies. Ava is also probably the character in Bunny with the most in-depth descriptions of her clothing, so her costumes were probably the easiest to figure out. I wanted to include a lot of different fabrics and textures like fur, lace, silks, and mesh to shroud Ava in mystery and elusiveness. For most of the show, Ava stays in the same costume, which also symbolizes how she is a character Samantha created rather than a person who chose these clothes for herself. The only time we see Ava in a different outfit is when Samantha's creations go against her wishes, with Samantha learning that Ava and Max are being intimate with each other, in which we see Ava in a red silk robe and black corset. Through my designs, red kind of became the signifying color of danger and unease throughout the story, as before this, red was only seen on the bunnies before they indoctrinate Samantha into becoming one of them. But then in this moment, we see Ava in this red robe and instantly know that suspense is brewing. After this, Ava returns in a flashback in her normal costume as Samantha retells the story of how her and Ava met, which puts an end to Ava's story as she dies at the hands of the bunnies, and her death acts as the final call to action for Samantha to take some form of agency to take her life and autonomy back from the bunnies. Ava's final scene is incredibly sentimental, and as we the audience see the love Samantha felt towards Ava, and despite the fact that Ava was her own creation, Ava helped her fall out of infatuation with the bunnies, and most of all, Ava made Samantha feel love. Next are the bunnies, and while the four of them each have their own signature style, they're introduced as one clique, one entity, one cult. Samantha describes the bunnies as having intricate Dutch braids, which she calls Game of Thrones hair, wearing A-line tweed dresses, and having lots of money. At the beginning of the story, Samantha is disgusted but also fascinated by the bunnies. Samantha's experience with wealth and her past along with her loneliness give her this resentment but also yearn for what the bunnies have: money, safety, and connection. I wanted to create a unified concept for the bunnies but still give them their own signature styles, and I did this by picking costume pieces with similar fabrics and colors to group them together but also differentiate them. All of the unique aesthetics of the bunnies work with a pastel color palette with bits and pieces of red and black for one of them, and lace ended up being the unifying fabric for the bunnies as it is prominent in all of their aesthetics. It's commonly associated with feminine fashion and is associated with wealth, beauty, and sensuality, which fit the bunnies very well. These little aspects in their designs unify them so the audience will know, even when they're not all together, that they are a bunny. Moving on to the bunny styles individually, I'm going to start with Caroline, who Samantha refers to as Cupcake. Samantha describes her as saying she looks like a pastel cupcake you'd find at a wedding or a tasteful Easter gathering, to the point that Samantha says she wishes to eat her. For her costumes, I took into consideration how the book describes her dresses, many of which are very outlandish, like a dress patterned with Bunsen burners, We Love a Woman in STEM, but I focused more on the pastel rainbow color palette and twee style. When researching twee fashion from the mid-2010s, photos of Jess from New Girl came up frequently, so I also used her as inspiration for Cupcake style, but a pastel version. Out of all of the bunnies, Cupcake to me seemed like she'd be the most inviting and outgoing, almost like she is the one to invite people to join the bunny cult, and I wanted to show that with her fabric choices in her costumes and of course with her color palette. Pastels are typically associated with innocence and childhood, which could draw people into a false sense of security. Cupcake also wears a lot of lace and sweaters and clothing with softer edges and shapes like ruffles and puff sleeves to make her appear more innocent and childlike. However, as to not give Cupcake all of the pastel rainbow, I typically gave Cupcake baby blue, peach, and lilac as colors I could always use to to dress her in if the other bunnies were in pastels in that scene to differentiate all of them. Lastly, using the principle of proportion in design, put Cupcake frequently in A-line and baby doll dresses to make her look, well, like a sugary confection. Next is Kira, who Samantha calls Creepy Doll. Creepy Doll is described as looking like an old porcelain doll with Shirley Temple curls of red hair and as the doll pet of the bunnies, wearing a cat ear headband at all times and going as far as purring whenever the other bunnies touch her. Samantha informs the readers that Creepy Doll writes fairy tale inspired and supernatural pieces, which I took into consideration when figuring out her costume design. I didn't want her to look like Cupcake but with a pastel goth color palette, so I went more in a kitschy, creepy cute direction with Creepy Doll. I still took inspiration from the pastel goth aesthetic that was very popular during 2014, along with the Lolita style that is very popular in Japan. I made sure to include plenty of cute patterns, as she is mentioned to wear countless patterned dresses throughout the book, but also still make her look kinda creepy. And that's where the symbolism with the color red started. Creepy Doll is the only bunny that wears red for many reasons. She constantly references Little Red Riding Hood, she's the most sinister of the bunnies when it comes to the rituals since they take place at her house, and she's the one who kills the defective hybrids by decapitating them with the axe, which is oddly similar to the Red Queen in Wonderland. Lastly, Creepy Doll is the one who fully indoctrinates Samantha into the bunnies by drugging her with a number of drugs and drinks. Thus, Creepy Doll is the symbol of danger with her signature blood red. While she is just as feminine and mystical as the other bunnies, Creepy Doll is a scary figure in the story, and that shows in the choices I've made in her design. After her is Victoria, who Samantha introduces to the audience as Vignette. Vignette is such an interesting character because it's alluded to that not only was Vignette the most recently indoctrinated into the bunny cult, but before becoming a bunny, she was just like Samantha. Samantha says when talking about her, despite her translucent blue-veined beauty that reminds Ava of skulls and me of the Victorians, she didn't always dress like prettified convection. When I met her at our very first Narrative Arts welcome reception, I saw another girl in jeans and plaid. Vignette is described as an existential writer who pretends to be poor, who only writes for shock value, looks stoned all the time, and looks like a drunk music box ballerina. To me, this translated to a Victorian take on the indie sleaze aesthetic of the mid-2010s mixed with the aesthetic of Lana Del Rey's Born to Die era. I made sure to include lace and brocade to unify her with the other bunnies, but gave her more flowy nightgown-like dresses to fit with her vintage Victorian aesthetic, but also to symbolize how she is the most sexual of the bunnies by giving her clothing you typically wear to bed. In terms of colors, I gravitated more towards ivories and creams for her designs, but added in some pastel yellows and mints to tie it all back to the pastel rainbow universe the bunnies' costumes live in. The contrast in her costumes also shows that she isn't who she really is, or at least was. Vignette wants to be seen as this worldly writer who makes magic with her words, but everything she does is so performative. She is this dazed person with no sense of identity other than her strong libido, and to me, she kind of represents the loss of identity and autonomy that comes from being with the bunnies, and because we see this performativity and bluntness in Samantha as well, it's not an unfair judgment to say that if Samantha was fully indoctrinated into a bunny at the end, she'd probably be very similar to Vignette. She's this nightmarish, sex-driven character that feels like a ghost, which I took as inspiration for her many ivory nightgown dresses. Lastly in the bunnies is Eleanor, who Samantha refers to as the Duchess. The Duchess is the leader of the bunnies and is the most put together, mature, and regal of the bunnies. Samantha describes her as looking like Icelandic royalty, like a fairy witch, like a graceful egret. She is the Odette to Ava's Odile in terms of appearances, but in terms of personality, the Duchess is the true Black Swan. They are true foils for each other through and through, and this will be evident in their designs. The Duchess is often described in the book as wearing dresses or tops with bell sleeves, which gives her a bird-like silhouette, yet also makes her look more witch-like, but also comforting. I can imagine the soft embrace of her lace and light fabric sleeves caressing someone's face and making them feel calm. The textures and shapes of her designs are very important as they give her the domineering presence that the leader of a clique would need to be successful. As far as colors, the Duchess's main colors are pink and white, which give her an egret-like feminine appearance. She is also arguably the richest of the bunnies, which is shown through the softness in her choice of fabrics and textures, and also her choices of jewelry, large diamond dagger crystals, and large pearl necklaces. The Duchess's costume design is meant to convey her wealth and power of the bunnies, as well as to create an imposing appearance for the main antagonist protagonist of the story. Next are the other prominent characters of Bunny, in which I'm going to start with Jonah. Jonah is Samantha's other friend besides Ava, and he is a poetry student at Warren University. He is somewhat of a reverse foil to Samantha, as he is just as much of an outcast in his field as Samantha, but he is content with his outcast identity, and before the events of the story, has recovered from very dark times in his life. While reading the book, Jonah seemed like the character who felt the most like a real person I'd encounter in my life. And then an important analogy to how I costumed Jonah came to me. Jonah is like the grown-up version of a quirky side character of a Disney Channel show. Think Fletcher from Ant Farm, or Gus from Mighty Med, maybe even Rory from My Babysitter's a Vampire. Jonah's style is described in the book as kind of referential and humorous, but he is almost always wearing a brown parka. I took this into consideration and gave Jonah's costumes baggy jeans and comfy sneakers, show how he is comfortable and content with life, and to make him friend-shaped, because he is. I don't make the rules. Lastly, in the final scene, Jonah is so happy to graduate, and he's the only one of the main characters to graduate with the rest of their cast, cap and gown and all. I interpreted this as Jonah taking back the years he lost due to his depression and addiction problems and getting to have a happy moment. Moving on to the faculty, Ursula is Samantha and the Bunny's creative writing professor. Samantha calls Ursula Fosco after Count Fosco from The Woman in White, whereas the Bunnies call her Care because, as they say, she just cares so much. It is also heavily alluded to that Ursula is also some form of witch and knows of the Bunnies and Samantha's magic. When describing Ursula for my costume designs, I described her as a 2014 New Age spiritualist who refuses to discuss the cultural appropriation and capitalistic nature in modern-day spiritual and witchcraft spaces. I also took inspiration from quirky teachers from 2000s media, most notably Miss Darbus from High School Musical, and characters that are either witches or people associated with witches, mostly Madame Mim from The Sword in the Stone, the witch from Into the Woods, and Stevie Nicks. Purple slowly became Ursula's main color, and captains with flowy sleeves show that she is an inviting yet quite eccentric character. The other faculty member present in the story is Alan, who Samantha exclusively calls the Lion. The Lion was one of Samantha's writing advisors, but before the events of Bunny, Samantha and the Lion were in a strained relationship with an imbalance of power because they are a student and teacher. The Lion is also an author who writes shock value novels that feature a lot of femicide, which combined with him being in a relationship with a student should tell you everything you need to know about him. He's like Ezra from Pretty Little Liars, but somehow even worse. Adding the 2014 to 2015 time frame for my costume designs and how he is described in the book, it was quite the easy decision to make the Lion into a hipster. Finally, we have Samantha's hybrid boy, Max. Max is so often compared in the book to JD from Heathers, and that comparison is so perfect. In nearly every scene, he is wearing a worn-down black trench coat, listens to indie rock music, and has ears full of piercings. Since he is Samantha's own creation, his clothing is so crafted to convey Samantha's desires and emotions. Whereas Ava represents Samantha's loneliness and she feels that void for her, Max represents Samantha's repressed anger at the Bunnies and her desire for revenge. He truly is the Jason Dean to Samantha as Veronica Sawyer. However, I didn't want Max to just be a JD clone, so to spice it up, I took inspiration from men's emo fashion, especially from the mid-2010s. Even though he is in all black with chains and spikes, his look is still youthful as he is quite the mischievous character and is the driving force for most of Act 2. Now that all of the characters' inspirations are out of the way, let's discuss the costume design scene by scene.
You're not a rebel. You're fucking psychotic.
You say tomato, I say tomato.
The story opens with a monologue from Samantha as she talks about the Bunnies and how she is an outcast and how she hates how the Bunnies are annoying, close-knit, and will never understand her struggles. Since Samantha is in nearly every single scene in the play, she has one costume for the majority of Act 1. Her main costume is a flannel, ripped black jeans, a black graphic tee, and black combat boots. As Samantha is describing her vitriol for the Bunnies enter stage, and behind Samantha, they are seen dancing and hugging each other. As these are their introduction outfits, the Bunnies' outfits are very simplified versions of their styles, and they are in their signature pastel colors. The Duchess is wearing a white bell-sleeve dress, white ballet flats, and pearl jewelry. Cupcake is wearing a ruffled blue dress with a light blue cardigan, white brogues, white ruffled lace socks, and dainty jewelry. Creepy Doll is wearing a pink and purple plaid dress, pink pastel goth accessories, pink Mary Janes, and her signature leopard print cat ears. And lastly, Vignette is wearing a mint green floral two-piece top and skirt with vintage details, lace socks, and white combat boots. This is the least vignette of her costumes, but this is because this is the introduction to the bunnies as an entity, whereas a later scene is more of an introduction to the bunnies individually. The introduction then turns into the beginning of the year party at Warren University, and Ava joins Samantha outside of the party having a smoke. Ava is wearing a black slip dress, black ripped fishnet tights, black heels, a black mesh birdcage veil, black mesh gloves, and a long pearl necklace. At the party, the bunnies creepily look at Samantha and Ava, and then at that moment, the bunnies give Samantha an invitation to one of their literary parties, which they call the Smut Salon. Samantha then monologues again as the scene transitions to the next day at school, where Samantha runs into Jonah. He's wearing dark wash baggy jeans, a kitten playing a keyboard in space t-shirt, his unzipped brown parka, and dirty sneakers. As they talk, the lion walks past them, which makes Samantha incredibly uncomfortable. Samantha describes him by saying, his tall, sleek frame, mane a carefully cultivated chaos, arms inked with watchful crows, wearing his usual obscured noise band t-shirt, one of the bands we used to talk about back when we used to talk. And later on in the book, Samantha specifies that the lion and her would listen to German industrial noise bands, so I did some research and found band merch for a popular German industrial band and incorporated it into his costume. I also put him in dark washed skinny jeans and brown steel-toed boots to complete his hipster look. This scene transitions to Samantha and Ava in their apartment for the tango scene, where they wear the same things they were wearing before. This scene really introduces Samantha and Ava's relationship to the audience. However, Samantha is hesitant in her dance steps. This leads to Samantha telling Ava that the bunnies invited her to their smut salon, and Ava tells her that if she's so curious, she should go. Samantha leaves her apartment and heads to Creepy Doll's house, which is where the smut salon is taking place. Samantha takes off her boots when she gets inside, and underneath her boots are basic white socks. This scene is where we truly get introduced to the bunnies and their personal styles, starting with Cupcake. Cupcake is described in this scene as wearing a dress of cerulean blue patterned with sinuous white clouds and one of her many matchy cardigans, which I used as my main inspiration for her design. I found an adorable cloud patterned Peter Pan colored dress on Pinterest and paired it with a light blue cardigan and her lace ruffle socks. Creepy Doll is described as wearing a dress patterned with ghosts with bloody eyes, which immediately made me think of the pastel goth dresses from online stores like kawaiigoods.com, rest in peace, so I found a pastel goth haunted house printed dress and put that as her costume. I also included her lace ruffle socks, leopard print cat ears, and since during the smut salon she reads an erotic version of Little Red Riding Hood, she has a red velvet hooded cloak on as well. Vignette's outfit is not described at the moment, but I'd assume that at the smut salon she'd want to be comfortable but also feel sexy. So I put her in a forest green brocade slip dress, simple jewelry, and black and white flower socks. Lastly, the Duchess is described to be wearing a white bell sleeve dress and a diamond necklace. To add on, I included a massive pearl choker and lace socks. The next important scene in the book is the first workshop of the year, but in order for there to be enough time for the bunnies to change into their school costumes, Samantha would have another monologue about what happened after the smut salon, where the bunnies try to get Samantha to find a wild rabbit for them late at night, and maybe also include the scene between Samantha and Jonah where Jonah sees Samantha talking to the rabbits in the courtyard. The first workshop serves as primarily an introduction to how the bunnies write and how they perceive Samantha from an academic lens, but also serves to introduce Ursula. Samantha calls what she wears an iridescent smock, so I gave Ursula an iridescent caftan with witchy jewelry, black kitten heels, and purple cat-eye reading glasses. The bunnies would also be dressed to impress with their own sets of reading glasses to match their outfits. Cupcake is described in this scene as wearing a grass pattern dress, so I found a light green leaf printed dress along with round mint glasses, a pearl necklace, and her lace ruffle socks and white brogues. For Creepy Doll, I wanted her in more of a baby doll dress style, and on Pinterest, I found one with a dollhouse print on the front and just had to include it. I paired it with red cat-eye glasses, lace ruffle socks, black Mary Janes, and her signature leopard cat ears. Since I put Cupcake in mint and already planned for the Duchess to be in white, I put Vignette in pink for once and put her in a light pink lingerie-esque dress, ripped black fishnets, white combat boots, and light pink reading glasses. Lastly, the Duchess would be the most academic looking for a workshop class, so I put her in a white two-piece skirt and jacket set, a white turtleneck, white ballet flats, her crystal dagger necklace, and pearl-lined white glasses. After class, Samantha goes to the dance studio in town to meet Ava there, who is wearing her normal costume, but she has one one peacock feather earring and a brown fur shawl around her shoulders. It's alluded to that Ava found or stole this shawl from somewhere in town, but after this brief conversation, Samantha heads back to Creepy Doll's house to hang out with the bunnies again. The bunnies are hosting a prom-themed get-together, so they are all wearing pastel prom dresses with heels and white satin gloves. Cupcake's dress is described in the book as having a Peter Pan collar and being peach, and I think I found the absolute perfect dress on Pinterest for this. I also gave her small white heels with bows on the strap. Creepy Doll, Vignette, and the Duchess then enter in their ball gowns. For Creepy Doll, I put her in a white Lolita-inspired ball gown with crimson accents, cute pink heels, and she is still wearing her cat ears. Vignette's dress has more of a vintage touch to it with its many ruffles and lace details, but she has more classic ivory heels. Lastly, the Duchess is wearing a light pink tulle ball gown with white heels and a pearl necklace. The bunnies, especially Creepy Doll, help Samantha get ready for their prom, and Creepy Doll gives Samantha one of her dresses to wear. The dress is described in the book when Samantha thinks, "She hands me a dress patterned all over with little beheaded girls with blonde beehive hairdos. Their smiling heads floated next to their decapitated bodies. Marie Antoinette's," she says. Now, it's probably impossible to find a dress with Marie Antoinette all over it without it looking too outlandish or busy, so I chose a black and white Lolita-style dress with cameo frames above the hem, which could be customized to have patterns of cartoon headless women. The dress is black and white as Samantha isn't fully indoctrinated yet, so the dress is still in her basic color palette rather than going full bunny. As the prom goes underway, 4 men arrive all dressed in ill-fitting navy suits, black leather dress shoes, and black leather gloves. The man Samantha talks about during the smut salon scene, Rob Valencia, also arrives wearing the same ill-fitting navy suit, black leather dress shoes, and black leather gloves as the other men. After the prom turns horrific after Rob Valencia's head explodes, Samantha faints and ends up in Creepy Doll's kitchen. A dazed Samantha finds Creepy Doll in a dusty lilac Lolita-style dress with a pentagram choker, her leopard cat ears, and her lace ruffle socks and black Mary Janes. Creepy Doll gives her a new outfit, a light blue dress with cats on it, pink tinted heart sunglasses, and white Mary Janes as they both get ready for the day. Before leaving, Creepy Doll puts on a red bell coat, and they meet up with the other bunnies at their favorite restaurant, Minnie. For practical purposes, since this would be a very fast quick change, the scene where Rob Valencia screams at Samantha about how conceited and superficial she is, the bunnies will not be on stage for that. Before that scene, the bunnies will run off with their dates, and then they would get changed for this scene. For this scene, Cupcake wears a light pink colored dress with a matching pink cardigan patterned with hearts along with her lace ruffle socks and white brogues. Vignette wears a champagne brocade A-line dress with her white combat boots, and the Duchess wears an off-the-shoulder white dress made of flowy fabrics and her white ballet flats and crystal dagger necklace. At Minnie, the bunnies discuss how Samantha is ready for workshop as they put a bunny mask over her face. They all end up donning bunny masks, and the 4 put on aprons that cater to their personalities and styles as they perform their ritual of turning a bunny into a man. The man they conjure up is wearing the same ill-fitted navy suit, black leather dress shoes, and black leather gloves that Rob and their prom dates were all wearing. Creepy Doll decapitates the man off stage as they welcome Samantha to their cult, and the stage goes black. Act 2/Part 2 and 3 of the story starts with a scene that I like to call Samantha's indoctrination. Also, for those who have not read this book, this is one of the wildest things I've ever read. Samantha's point of view switches to exclusively using "we" to refer to herself as she has become a bunny. It's unclear where the bunnies end and Samantha starts, which is so fascinating. For the costume design, Samantha is wearing the same blue dress she was wearing at the end of Act 1, just with more bunny-esque accessories and with her own pair of lace ruffle socks. Moving on to the rest of the bunnies, Cupcake is described as having a dress pattern with unicorns on it, so I found a pastel unicorn and candy themed dress on Pinterest and paired it with her lace ruffle socks and white brogues, along with tiny plastic kid-like jewelry like the My Little Pony rings I included in the slideshow. Creepy Doll is wearing a ruffled white blouse, a strawberry printed overall dress, her lace ruffle socks and black Mary Janes, and her leopard cat ears. Vignette is wearing a green floral vintage dress, ripped fishnets, and her white combat boots, and lastly, the Duchess would wear a lace pink number with her white ballet flats. Samantha and the bunnies' costumes stayed the same for quite a bit of Act 2, so moving on to more of the story, Ava finds Samantha and brings her to a dark alley to snap her out of the bunnies' indoctrination. In this scene, Ava is wearing her regular outfit of a black slip dress, black fishnets, black heels, a black birdcage mesh veil, black mesh gloves, but she also wears long snake earrings as it is mentioned in the book. As the scene continues, Samantha is broken out of the bunny trance, but then Ava is scared off by the Duchess. Samantha wants to run after her, and then, conveniently, Jonah shows up in his van. Jonah is wearing what he was wearing in Act 1. They try and fail to find Ava, but then Samantha gets a text to come to Creepy Doll's house immediately. As she gets there, the bunnies want Samantha to lead one of their rituals to see what kind of hybrid she makes, which leads to the scene I call the creation of Max. The bunnies once again don on their aprons, with Samantha having her own ruffled apron this time as they stand in a circle holding hands. Since the bunny in front of them doesn't explode, they assume the ritual didn't work, but minutes later they see a boy standing by the bus stop. Max is described as looking like a Satanist or an art student by Samantha simply by what he is wearing. For my costume design, Max stays in the same costume except for minor changes that go with the course of the story. His main costume consists of a black skull graphic tee, black ripped jeans, a weathered black trench coat, a black belt and chains on his jeans, a pendant or locket necklace, and black boots. Right after this is the final workshop class before winter break, so once again for practicality purposes, Samantha would do another monologue or have a small scene just between her and Max, and then Max would have a small scene to himself waiting at the bus stop and talking about how odd the girls he just encountered are, so Samantha can have time to change as well. Max's creation is such a turning point in Samantha's journey, so I wanted her to change outfits at this point in the story. This is when Samantha starts to gain her sense of identity back, but not entirely. Samantha gets her ripped black jeans and black combat boots back, but instead of her flannel, she's wearing a black crochet top and black and white crochet sweater with lace trim. The bunny indoctrination is still somewhat in her, and I wanted to convey that through her costume for most of the remainder of Act 2. For the final workshop before winter break, I wanted all of the bunnies to look warm and cozy and inviting with lots of furs and soft textures like yarn and fleece to create this lonely feeling for Samantha. Almost as if they're saying, "Look at our soft, comfortable, loving clothing. You will never know what it feels like to be warm, to be loved." This is also the last time we see the bunnies for a while, so I wanted these costumes to leave a lasting impression. Cupcake wears a peachy fur sweater with a peach tulle skirt and her white brogues and lace ruffle socks. Creepy Doll wears a white blouse, white and red sweater vest, a red plaid skirt, red leg warmers, and her black Mary Janes and leopard cat ears. Vignette wears a vintage light mint dress with white combat boots and ripped fishnets, as well as having ivory ear muffs and an ivory hand muff. And lastly, the Duchess would wear a white fleecy sweater with a matching beret, a pastel skirt, and her white ballet flats. Ursula would be wearing something celebratory and formal, so I put her in a berry pink velvet caftan, a royal blue silk scarf, and royal blue kitten heels. After this workshop, Samantha unexpectedly encounters the lion again to discuss writing, and the lion would be wearing the same costume he was wearing before. After it is officially winter break, Samantha finds herself alone in her apartment, in which she would give another monologue, likely something like the hands metaphor she uses in the book about whose hands she wishes she could rest in, but she feels like she deserves nobody's comfort. Afterward, she puts on her black coat and decides to stroll around the more expensive grocery store in town, where she sees Max shoplifting and stuffing anything he can into his trench coat. He is wearing the same costume as before. Samantha also runs into Ursula, who is wearing the same caftan, but this time with a matching pink capelet. Ursula invites Samantha to her Yule party, and Samantha cannot refuse. At the Yule party, Samantha sees Ursula's husband Silky, a poetry professor at Warren, who is wearing a light pink suit with a silk pink shirt underneath, as well as their daughter Persephone, who is wearing a black ball gown. The only other student at the Yule party is Jonah, who Samantha says is wearing his only formal outfit, his baggy jeans, sneakers, an unzipped brown parka, a white button-down, and a tie printed with Edvard Munch's The Scream. During the party, Samantha sees Max peeking through the window, and she meets him outside. He takes her back to her apartment, where she finds Ava in a black slip dress covered up by a long red silk robe corseted by a black corset belt, along with her black fishnets, black birdcage veil, black mesh gloves, and black heels. Samantha realizes at this moment that she created something the bunnies could only ever dream of, a unique human entity who is also a sexual being, as Samantha quickly realizes that Ava and Max are hooking up. This leads Samantha to tell Ava everything about the bunnies before Samantha unexpectedly has to go back for another workshop class back at school, leading to a scene I like to call Max's workshop. This scene is so important to the story of Bunny because this scene is when the bunnies start to turn on each other, and the intrusive thoughts of aggression and anger that Samantha has had since the beginning start to come to fruition, all thanks to Max. Ursula is back in her iridescent caftan, witchy jewelry, black kitten heels, and purple reading glasses. Samantha sits down and sees Cupcake, who is in a lavender poofy dress, a white cardigan with cupcake buttons, white lace ruffle socks, and her white brogues. While this is more of a hair and makeup design thing, it's important to mention that Cupcake's cardigan cardigan is hiding bloody scars that are all over her arms, chest, and back that say, "Eat me." This would be done with cream paint, scar wax, and fake blood. Creepy doll then walks in, and she is in a red velvet baby doll dress with a matching red cloak, spiderweb tights, and platform black heels. This also directly references the smut salon scene, as Creepy doll is once again dressed like Little Red Riding Hood, and Cupcake scars reference how during the smut salon, she erotically shaves a cinnamon stick with a razor. It is also important to note that this is the first time Creepy doll doesn't wear her cat ears. Vignette runs in next, and Samantha says she looks like a jewelry box ballerina come to life and gone off the rails. Her sour garbage smell takes our breath away. So I put her in a dirty ivory nightgown with her white combat boots, and with the hair and makeup design, her makeup would be very smeared and messy, and her hair would just be as bad. Lastly is the Duchess, who is described to be wearing a dress similar to a nun's habit, so I gave her a black turtleneck evening dress. However, since this scene references the smut salon and the more sexual aspects of the bunnies, I made the Duchess's dress be sheer at the top to make it more modern and revealing. She is also wearing black suede boots, as is directly mentioned in the book. After Samantha is horrified by what Max did to the bunnies, she confronts him at her and Ava's apartment, where he is wearing his normal clothes, but he is mischievously wearing Creepy doll's leopard cat ears. While they argue, Ava is dancing on the roof drunk, wearing the dress and robe from the apartment scene. Suddenly, Samantha gets another urgent text message to go to workshop from Ursula and the lion. Max says it has to be important, so she should go. As Samantha walks in, she can't see a thing until she sees who she thinks are Ursula and the lion. One of the bunnies turns a light on and reveals their hybrid versions of Ursula and the lion, which would be wearing their regular clothes but with oversized navy blazers on top of their costumes and black with their gloves. Also, as far as the makeup designs, there would be some SFX prosthetics on their faces to show how poorly and haphazardly the bunnies made these hybrids. While hybrid Ursula and lion ramble to Samantha about how terrible of a writer and person she is, the bunnies guard the doors and try to seem as frightening as possible, which is honestly kind of hard for them. The book mentions that as the book progresses, the bunnies start wearing more and more black to seem more serious, like Samantha, so I took that into consideration and put them in a black and white color palette, since even with black incorporated in their wardrobes now, they're still impersonating Samantha's trauma and style, so it's not completely a perfect copy, kind of like their drafts. I put the Duchess in an elegant black and white maxi dress with flowing sleeves and her black suede boots from Max's workshop, Cupcake in a black and white tulle dress that is kind of shaped like a cupcake with her lace socks and white brogues, Creepy doll in a black baby doll dress with a creepy pattern with her black Mary Janes and gloves, since she's referenced to be holding her axe in this scene, and Vignette in a white lace vintage dress and black combat boots. After the bunnies and hybrid Ursula and the lion torture Samantha, a janitor finds her but believes it's just art students being outlandish and creative. The janitor is, of course, wearing a janitor uniform. After this scene, Samantha goes back to her apartment, but finds another horrific sight. Max standing over the bloody body of a swan, which is when everything starts to click for Samantha. The swan is Ava, and Ava is dead. The scene turns into a monologue of Samantha explaining how she met Ava to Max, in which Ava joins her on stage in her regular costume again. After this, Max and Samantha realize that the bunnies killed Ava, and Samantha puts her coat back on as they plot revenge. Samantha barges into the Duchess's house, where she finds the bunnies all in black, almost like they're all cosplaying Ava, but in their own styles. Cupcake and Creepy doll have the black birdcage veils, Vignette has the black mesh gloves, and the Duchess is basically wearing Ava's outfit, just not as flattering on her as it was on Ava. They're also all wearing black heels. Cupcake's black dress does have ruffles and is a slightly cupcake-like silhouette, but is more of a vintage pinup dress. Creepy doll's black dress I chose reminded me of Misa's maid dress from Death Note, which I just watched for the first time. Oh my god, so interesting. But her dress has many layers and bows. Vignette's dress is black and lacy to fit her vintage yet sexy style, and the Duchess is wearing a black silk slip dress, just like Ava did. In the end, Samantha cannot bring herself to kill the bunnies, but they all see Max staring out the window, which I kind of pictured like that scene in Euphoria of Cassie staring into the auditorium like a velociraptor from Jurassic Park. They They all recognize him as the man who's been messing with them, but they're all infatuated by him, calling out the names they called him in their fantasies described during the workshop scene. They trample him and each other as Max turns back into the real animal he was made from, a stag Samantha saw run off into the cold forest before the creation of Max scene, and Samantha leaves the bunnies to deal with themselves. The final scene of the story is the graduation. Samantha's final costume is a gray dress with her black combat boots, which symbolizes how she has her autonomy back, but is no longer the person she was before. Samantha mentions early on in the book that she doesn't wear dresses, so her ending the story wearing a dress shows how she isn't the same character she was before. The gray is also symbolic of how Samantha's story has ended in a neutral spot. She wasn't fully indoctrinated by the bunnies, but she's not the same blunt alternative girl she was before. After walking in graduation, Ursula and the bunnies find Samantha to celebrate being the first all-women writing cohort in Warren's history. Ursula is once again wearing her iridescent caftan, black kitten heels, and witchy jewelry. The bunnies are in their finest dresses, but also covered in casts and bandages to hide their injuries. I put the Duchess in a light pink bell-sleeved high-low dress since the Duchess would still want to look her best for graduation. I put Creepy Doll in a red fairy tale patterned baby doll dress, Vignette in a lace ivory nightgown dress, and Cupcake in a pink floral dress with a pink cardigan. The book specifically mentions Cupcake wearing a cardigan to still cover up the Eat Me scars, which still haven't fully healed. Lastly, Jonah congratulates Samantha on graduating, where he is wearing his formal outfit from the Yule party, but with a cap and gown. He waves at the poets, who are dressed in formal black suits and act in unison, kind of like the bunnies. The story ends with Samantha telling Jonah she wishes to pursue their friendship more, but the story becomes more twisted as it ends in an unclear sentence, as the last line is, "The mud answered, 'Yes, I'd love to.'" As I've mentioned, I'd like to play with both interpretations that Jonah is real or Jonah was just another one of Samantha's creations. And then the lights go black. So that was my costume design for Bunny if it were turned into a play or any form of stage production. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the bell for notifications. Leave a comment down below if you could see this being a real play, because I would love for this to, at some point, become a theatrical production or possibly a full feature film. Or leave a comment of any book recommendations, because I'm always looking for new books to read. For reference, I really like psychological horror, YA novels, fantasy, and anything suspenseful. See you all in the next video. Thank you so much.